Willie Brennan is Irish and my best friend. His parents came from Conamara, where his father was a fisherman. When Willie was 2 years old, his parents decided to move to his uncle in America, Louisiana to be more precise. Upon arrival, they lived in a mobile home for the first 3 years while his father worked on a shrimp trawler with his uncle. By the time Willie was 9, his father had 2 shrimp trawlers of his own and they had moved into a nice house, which, oddly enough, was only 3 houses away from mine. He and I became fast friends and went through middle school, high school, and college together. After graduation, I joined the Army ROT program, and Willie went to Conamara to visit relatives. He and his family father, mother, and 3 sisters traveled there regularly for many years. He spent a year there with his grandmother. My first service after becoming an officer was Bulk Basic Officer Leadership Course. The goal was to teach basic leadership skills. It was a little tougher than what my ROT instructors taught, but overall not bad. After that, I was sent on a 3-year assignment to Casto, Belgium, and SHAPE, the military arm of NATO, where I served as the youngest and most inexperienced officer on the staff. All NATO countries sent their best there because they represented their countries to the rest of the world. I felt extremely lucky and assumed that someone had made a mistake in sending me there. 3 months later, Willie asked if I could pop over to Conamara for the weekend. We hadn't seen each other since graduation, so I agreed. When organizing transport, I discovered, contrary to my childhood belief, that Conamara is not a city, but a region. To get there, I had to fly to Limerick, where Willie would pick me up and take me to his grandmother's house in Clifton. The drive took just over 2 hours and took us past Galway Bay and through Galway itself, where we stopped for food and drinks. Drinking with him was something I did quite often. So, we were in a pub in Galway, Ireland, discussing the last few months. He told me that his grandmother was doing well and was glad he was with her. She tried to convince him to stay and introduced him to several local girls. He had always been proud of his Irish heritage, but seeing it in this environment felt like he was at home. His grandmother was wonderful, and even at her age, I could imagine that she was an attractive girl in her youth. Some people look older as they age, and that's not always flattering. Others, on the contrary, age very well. Katie Brennan was one of them. She could pass for Willie's mother. She was socially active, and popular, very popular. Most of the time she was engaged in matchmaking. A few hours' drive from Clifton was the town of Lisdoonvarna and the country's largest matchmaking festival. She started a much smaller festival in Clifton and dreamed of making it even bigger than the one in Lisdoonvarna. Her first words to me were, "So you are the scoundrel who always tried to lead my Willie astray." I don't know what he told her, but I liked her right away. It was the start of a fun 2 days. I met a girl who she insistently wanted to marry off to Willie. Her name was Sophie, and she and Willie had no illusions about what Katie Brennan wanted, but Willie had no intention of staying in Ireland and Sophie had no intention of leaving. But they fell in love and became a couple. Sophie was born and raised in Clifton, so she knew a lot of people. She invited some of them to meet me at Willie and her favorite pub. I'd like to say that Irish girls were frivolous, but that's not true. I didn't try very hard. Americans don't have much of a reputation in some places in the world. So, as in Belgium, I was on my best behavior. This was one of the first things they drilled into me at Bulk. We were taught that no matter what country we were in, we were guests of that country and subject to its laws, and any behavior that could embarrass us or the United States as a whole was not welcomed by either the Army or the host country. So I tried to be a good guest. At one point on the first evening, I tried to buy our small group drinks, but was quickly warned that I was their guest. "I've known since I was a kid," Willie said, "that the Irish are generous and kind people, until you hurt them, and then you're screwed unless they decide to forgive you." One of Sophie's friends and I spent most of the evening and the next day together. Her name was Maeve, and she was everything you'd imagine an Irish girl to be. with long, thick red hair, pink skin, and a personality that made you laugh and wonder at the same time. When I was leaving to go back to SHAPE, she came to Katie's house to say goodbye. She took my phone and added her address and phone number to my contacts. I did the same with her phone. Then she kissed me on the cheek and left. During the 2 evenings I spent there, individuals or couples disappeared from our small group, and new ones took their place. Willie told me the first night that the Irish tend to leave social events by simply walking away and not making a big deal out of it. It apparently started when someone got drunk and left quietly to avoid embarrassment, but it became a popular way of leaving parties. This was called the Irish farewell, or French departure. Maeve and I started texting and talking on the phone. Over the next 3 months, I spent several weekends either in Clifton or Limerick with her. For 6 months, Maeve and I saw each other whenever one of us could visit the other. At SHAPE, I enjoyed my job and the exposure to the international environment. My desk was in an office with officers from Turkey, Italy, Great Britain, and Denmark. The Danish officer was a captain from Copenhagen and was what you might imagine when you think of a Danish woman: pure, unadulterated beauty. Her name was Irene, and she seemed to get along with everyone in the office and everyone who came into the office except me. Everything I did seemed wrong to her. After the first couple of weeks of our communication, we simply stopped communicating. She did her job, and I did mine. At first, I tried to figure out what I had done to alienate her, but I couldn't come up with anything. I didn't act like a jerk. I treated her with respect. I didn't lick her like most people who dated her. Watching her in action and listening to her, I realized that she was both funny and smart. She was also efficient and did her job well. She was respected for her abilities and valued for her appearance. She just didn't like me, and it showed. Others in the office commented that I was the only person to whom it was obvious that she was indifferent to me. Our job was to standardize position documents. This meant sending them through an international approval or rejection process. Coordinating with all these different countries has been challenging, rewarding, and fun. Anyway, after the first few weeks, I just gave up. She remained in her own little world, and I remained in mine, both mentally and physically. We even stopped saying hello in the morning when we came to the office, or saying goodbye in the evening at the end of the working day. Everyone else was polite, respectful, and appreciated the mutual assistance and respect we showed each other. Maeve came to visit me one weekend, and we spent time at my favorite bar right outside the back gate of SHAPE headquarters. We were taking our time with the snacks and wine when Irene entered the bar with another Danish officer. We carefully avoided each other. After an hour or so, Maeve and I left and spent the night at my place. Grandma Willie thought Maeve and I would get married, but that didn't happen. We stayed together for 9 months and had a good time, but then we went our separate ways. Willie was still in Ireland, but was ready to return home, although he was not ready to leave Sophie. Katie didn't want him to leave, but he wanted to move on with his life, not Katie's. On the other hand, Sophie decided that if he went home, she would go with him. I was his best man at their wedding in Clifton. Maeve was there with her date and introduced us. I was ready to go home too. That's why I came back. I took a 2-week vacation and flew home. After a week, I was ready to return to Belgium. At work, an officer from Turkey was transferred and went back to Turkey because his 3-year contract had ended. A large group of his friends and colleagues gathered at the back gate bar to see him off. The bar was crowded. We treated him to drinks, and he handed out boxes of the delicious national Turkish delicacy, Turkish delight. Living and working in an international environment has been a wonderful experience. I was welcomed into the homes of my colleagues, where I got to know their families and taste their food. Not a week went by without me being invited somewhere. I lived in the barracks for single officers in my own room. Irene also lived there, but at the opposite end of the building and 2 floors below, so I rarely saw her. There was a communal kitchen, but I mostly ate in the officers' club or in the mess hall in the headquarters building. There was always some kind of smell in the Bach kitchen. Most of them were pleasant, some were not, and some were downright disgusting. The main store in the small shopping center on the premises was called Bon Marché, which loosely translated as a good market or a good deal. It was an amazing place to shop and had a lot of variety. Products and goods from all NATO countries were available there. At my Turkish colleague's farewell party, I decided to leave quite early in the morning since I had an early morning meeting the next day. The next day, the meeting started early and lasted until almost lunchtime. I returned to my office just in time to lock my meeting notes in the safe and head out to lunch. I had just picked up lunch when Irene walked past with another female officer whom I did not know. To my surprise, she stopped. "Your predecessor never left a party early," she said sarcastically. Out of habit, I stood up to answer her. Maybe my predecessor didn't have an early meeting the next day. Or maybe he was better prepared for his meetings. I looked at her, smiled, and said as politely as possible, "Have a nice lunch, Captain Bundgaard." Then he sat down. I never watched her leave, although I saw her leave many times and always appreciated this picture, regardless of my personal feelings towards it. My personal feelings towards her, what were they really? I really didn't know. I didn't hate her. I didn't even dislike her. But at the same time, she didn't give me a chance to love her, so I had no idea about my feelings. I was still probably the most junior officer from any country in SHAPE. I didn't think much about it and smiled from time to time because I still believed that I had been sent here by mistake and that some poor clerk in Washington at the personnel center was in big trouble for sending me. By the time my first year was coming to an end, besides Maeve, I had dated women from Italy, the UK, Greece, Portugal, and the USA. I started to notice looks and comments from some of the other Bach residents about my many dates and diverse group of women. Even the 3 Italian officers who lived there and were considered Casanovas called me Farfallone, which I heard meant a woman or a womanizer. I considered this high praise from them. Living in the international community had many advantages. The Bach was a crucible for single officers, both men and women. Officers from 9 countries lived there. It was truly a special place. The entire community seemed to embrace some of the other people's holidays. American Halloween was popular for children and married friends of friends who loved seeing children from all over the world dressed in costumes with some truly original designs and concepts ringing their doorbells for candy. The entire community also celebrated the German Oktoberfest. It was one of the most popular and fun holidays. Thanksgiving, isn't that popular? The international community failed to understand the meaning of this holiday. However, Christmas was Christmas all over the world. I thought about going home for the holidays, but decided that spending the weekend with a German naval officer who also lived at Bach was the best option. We went to Nurburg for the Christkindlesmarkt Christmas market. This is the Christmas market in the central square of the old town of Nuremberg. Stalls, lights, food, adventure, it was all combined into one great experience. The British knew how to throw magnificent ceremonies with lots of pomp and circumstance, but the Germans knew how to throw celebrations. We spent the weekend enjoying our time in Nuremberg just before Christmas. I didn't want to deal with the hassle of traveling over the holidays, so I decided to stay at SHAPE, which was actually closing for a few days before Christmas Day. However, each office had to have someone on staff every day except Christmas. So our department head made a schedule. He put the days of the week in one hat and our names in the other. First he pulled out the day, then the name. He pulled out Tuesday and my name. He pulled out Thursday and the name Irene. Friday was Christmas. One officer, the one from England, was never chosen, so he had the whole week free. This week we only had to work on the day our name was chosen for duty. I heard Irene tell others that she would like to go home, but if she had to work on Thursday, it would be inconvenient. Crap. I didn't want to change with her because I didn't want her to think that she owed me anything. Not that she did, but besides, if I worked all week, Others might leave to their home countries for the entire week and not report to work on their assigned day. I went into the office of the head of the department. I'm not going anywhere for the holidays. Why not give the others the whole week off? It's going to be dead here anyway, and I think I can handle whatever comes along. You are sure? Yes, sir. Just one condition. Which? Don't tell anyone I volunteered for this. Just say it's settled. You are sure? He asked a second time. Yes, sir. It was Friday. Just before the end of the workday, he came out and announced, "There have been changes. I have revised the schedule for next week. Most of the key staff will be leaving, and there are no urgent deadlines, so you can all take a week off and enjoy time with your families. Merry Christmas to you." There was applause, and a bottle of champagne and glasses appeared from somewhere. We all drank, wished each other all the usual wishes, and got ready to leave. Irene hugged everyone else and even wished me a Merry Christmas. I reciprocated, and everyone went their separate ways. The boss left. "It's too early to have regrets," he said, "and everyone's already gone, so you can't change your mind." I smiled. "I won't be sorry, sir. I'll enjoy the peace and quiet." He put his hat on my table and sat down on the corner. "What's between you and Bundgard? What do you have in mind?" "You know what I mean. She's the nicest, calmest person in the world as long as you're around. Then she changes. It's not that she becomes angry, but she seems tense. Why is that?" I shrugged. "I have no idea. We haven't spoken more than a dozen words the entire time I've been here." "Well, something is happening. Between us, right after you arrived, she asked her coordinator to transfer her back to Denmark. They put it off as long as they could, but they found a replacement. She will be leaving by mid-January. Like I said, I don't know. Okay? She's good at what she does. It's a shame to lose her." It was Tuesday of the following week. I was alone in the office. The Danish officer entered and smiled. "Looks like today is your work day." I stood at attention. "Yes, sir." "What day does Captain Bundgard work?" "She's not working this week, sir. She has a week off." "All week?" "Yes, sir." "When is your day off?" "Friday, sir. It was Christmas Day." He was about to leave, and I was about to sit down, but he turned around to look at me. I stood up again. He looked me up and down, then left. It was a little after lunch on Thursday. I was going through a small stack of documents on my desk, carefully making sure I didn't miss anything, when a man walked into the office. I looked up and saw a 4-star German admiral heading towards my desk. "Merry Christmas, Lieutenant," he said, holding out his hand for a handshake as I stood up abruptly. "Why don't you close everything here and go home?" "That's a good idea, sir. With your permission, I will do so." "Great, do it." And now he has already left. I followed him and watched as he walked down the hallway and entered each office, apparently wishing Merry Christmas to everyone he saw. SHAPE had 3 flag officers of 4-star rank: Chasseur Supreme Allied Commander Europe, who was an American, Chasseur Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe, who was British, and the Chief of Staff, a German admiral. I met everyone and was in meetings with everyone, so I got to know the Chief of Staff. They were all very important figures in their respective countries and were considered the best in the world. Christmas Day was Friday, and I spent it at Bach with others who had decided to stay. The weekend passed quietly until Sunday evening when everyone started returning. I had to remind myself how different Europe is from America. You could drive from Belgium, where I was, to Rome, Italy, in 15 hours. This is a road through parts of Germany, France, and Switzerland before reaching Italy. Hell, it takes about 13 hours just to drive through the state of Texas on Interstate 10. Many people stationed at SHAPE may have made frequent trips home to their respective countries. Monday morning, everyone was happy and excited to get back to work. That's because what we were doing was exciting. Everyone spent most of the morning talking about their holidays. When it was my turn, I didn't have much to say. I called my mom and my best friend. I found out his wife was having a baby. That's it for me. "You weren't with Kristen?" asked Tommy, the British captain. Kristen was a German naval officer whom I dated for a while and went to Nurburg. When he asked me, I noticed from the corner of my eye how Irene turned her back to us. No, she needed to be home with her family. This sparked a discussion of traditions and customs. Irene did not take part in the discussion. She stood and looked out the window until someone asked her opinion, and she excused herself and left the room. This was followed by another discussion started by an Italian who asked me how many women I had met during the holidays, which led to a debate about the number of dates I had been on since I came to SHAPE and the reputation I had earned like a ladies' man. When Irene returned, everyone got back to business. The new year was here and parties were in abundance. Everyone was having a party. I was invited to 7 and accepted the invitation to 2 of them. I went to the first one and never got to the second one. The first one was arranged by our department head. This party was not to be missed. There were about 30 people there, including our small staff and the spouses of 3 married people. I know a lot of people because of my work with them. I dated one of them, but she was with someone else, so I stayed away from her. I danced with 3 others and said hi to all the guys I worked with. I even saw Irene, who was with an older couple. My boss, his wife, and I chatted for a few minutes before they continued chatting with the other guests, and I continued chatting with such a diverse group. It was about 20 minutes after 11, and everyone was getting ready to celebrate the new year. The older man I saw earlier with Irene came up to me and started speaking in broken English. Sorry for my words. I don't speak your language that well. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to me. He hesitated, searching for words. But I'm trying to tell you. She's right. I can see how you upset her. He hesitated again before he said sternly, "Don't hurt my Irina anymore." Irene appeared out of nowhere, took his hand and said something to him in Danish, and they left. They had only gone a couple of steps when he turned around and said something like, "Ga vik." I felt a hand on my shoulder. "What did you do to him?" asked Tommy, my British office colleague. "Nothing. I don't even know him." "I know. It's Irene's father, and I think he just told you to leave." "Leave? From where? For what?" "I don't know. Mate, I'm going to get a drink and find my wife. She's a good midnight kisser." He laughed and rolled aside. I didn't wait until midnight. Irene's father might have told me to go away again if he had seen me, only it could have been more public and humiliating for both of us. He seemed to be under the weather, and there was no telling how he might react if he got even drunker and saw me again, so I did the Irish exit. New Year, like Christmas, fell on Friday. I didn't return to the office until Monday. I was the first to arrive. The boss came next. I thanked him for the invitation and told him how much I enjoyed it. He was German, so we talked about how much fun it was with all these different people. Irene was the last one to arrive at the office, and, like every other day, she said hello to everyone except me on her way to her desk. The boss called her into his office, and they were only there for a few minutes. When they left, he gathered us together. Irene will be transferred. She will leave in 2 weeks when her replacement arrives. Until her departure, work will continue as usual. Also, as we all know, Captain Donati is returning to Italy at the end of the month. His replacement will arrive next week. Lots of changes in a short time, but we cannot lose sight of our mission. Let's get back to work. I returned to my desk and began to work, but stopped when Irene walked by. I looked at her, and a couple of times it seemed to me that she was also looking in my direction. To hell with it. I called Kristen to see if she was available for dinner. She was busy. A discussion started in the office, and I became distracted until it was time to leave. I went to Bach and emailed Willie and told him about my day. He answered almost immediately and laughed until he dropped. He, of course, knew about Irene and made fun of me all the time because of my passion for her. I kept telling him to kiss my ass. Dinner in Europe is usually served later than we are used to in America, but I was already used to it, so it was almost 8 p.m. when I sat down to order it at the officers' club. I had just received the menu when she came to my table. "Do you mind if I join you?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, I mind. I prefer not to have dinner with someone who treats me like I don't exist. Let someone else enjoy your bad attitude." After these words, I just looked at her. She stood there for a few seconds, then said, "You're right, of course. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. You remind me of someone I don't like, and you don't deserve to be treated that way. I'm sorry." And now she has already left. The day she left, she came to the office to say goodbye. She hugged everyone and kissed everyone on the cheek except me, and everyone around her told her how much they enjoyed working together and how much they would miss her. I sat at my desk, pretending to work. When she was done with them, she stood in front of my desk, placed a flower in front of me, and left. There was silence in the office. Everyone was looking at me. Tommy, a Brit, came up to me. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. I looked at him. "I have no idea." "This is the lily of the valley. Among other things, they are given to those from whom they want to receive forgiveness. I know this because I gave them to my wife more than once." I took the flower and smelled it. The next year flew by very quickly. Kristen and I became a couple until her tour of duty ended and she returned to Germany. In fact, not to Germany, but to one of the ships of the German Navy. Willie, Sophie, and their son Philip and I spent 2 weeks traveling around Europe after spending time in Clifton with Grandma Katie. It was early spring, and I was in my final months at SHAPE. Annika Nilsson and I maintained an open, friendly relationship and met for coffee from time to time. One day she called me. "Just wanted to let you know that Irene will be here on Monday. She is part of the planning group and will be here for the week." She asked if I was still here. When I said yes, she asked me to ask you if you would be willing to meet her for coffee. I thought for a few seconds and remembered Lily of the Valley. "Please tell her yes." "I will do so." 2 hours later, she called back. "They will arrive on Monday morning, and their first meeting is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. How about coffee at 11? This will be good." Our meeting was a little awkward at first. We were silent for a long time, not knowing what to say. By midday, we relaxed a little and even started smiling at each other. She had just started telling me about how her fiancé had called off the wedding when she realized she had to run away. Returning to my office, I saw that Irene's replacement, a different captain but a man, was the only one who worked less than me in the office. I'm older than him in terms of time and shape, but he had a higher rank, although everyone else did too. All were captains or majors. I was still a lieutenant, but already a senior lieutenant because I had been promoted. After finishing my workday, I headed to Bach and my usual place to relax before dinner. I had just ordered at the club when Irene came in, looked around, saw me, and came over. This time I stood up. "We're having a small reception in one of the rooms, but it will end soon. Would you like a drink after?" she asked. Yes, I would like to. That night, I heard the same story from her that I heard from Annika Nilsson about her fiancé. "I was so angry and upset and treated you so badly. I can never apologize enough," she said. "My behavior was unacceptable, and I was ashamed of myself." The week she spent here, we spent all our free time together. It was fun, except for the last evening we spent together before she returned to Denmark. "Philip, this week has been wonderful, and I still regret the time I wasted while I was here. But you should know something." "Okay, what is this?" "I know you must be wondering if I think about my ex-fiancé when I'm with you. I know this because I've wondered this myself, and the honest answer is I don't know. I don't think so, but you look so much like him, and I fell in love with him and what he was, which I'm not sure." In fact, I thought about it. I definitely didn't want to be her replacement, but I knew I'd never know for sure. There will always be doubt. It didn't matter anyway because chances were high that this week would be the last time I'd see her because I'd be back in the States in a few months. When we parted, I received the traditional kiss on the cheek and a warm, sincere goodbye. I finished my 3-year assignment and returned to the USA. Took 30 days leave before reporting to the Pentagon, where I was an operations officer. Same job as in Belgium. Once again, I found myself to be the most junior person in the office, and again it seemed to be a mistake. My boss even called the HR center to see if they had made a mistake, and they told him no, there was no mistake. He looked at me. "Lieutenant Parker, it looks like you've been selected for a quick promotion. First SHAPE, now here. I advise you to keep your nose to the wind, work hard, and start getting your master's degree as soon as possible. It looks like you're going to get a good place. You'll need some team time after that." Indeed, I set off. From the office to another barracks for bachelors and back. Then I decided to rent a house. I rented it, bought furniture, and everything needed to furnish it. It was a relief to be able to spread out after years of living in one bunk room. Working hours were long. I had the weekend and I was resting. It took me 3 months to realize that I needed to have sex. The officers' club became my main place to go, but the choice was quite limited. I managed to contact another officer and we became lovers, but nothing more. She outranked me by 2 levels and was 5 years older than me, but that didn't matter. We reserved our Saturday evenings exclusively for sex. This worked quite well for almost a year. Then I received a phone call. It was my friend from the German Navy. She was serving on their training sailboat, and he was scheduled to meet up with our training sailboat in Boston for the long weekend of the Tall Sail Show. She asked if I could find time to see her. I did it. We met. We said hello. We had dinner and went to bed. We stayed there as long as their 3-day visit allowed. After another 6 months, I was doing well at my job. Willie, Sophie, and my namesake Philip were doing well too. We continued to see each other every couple of months, and he was still my best friend. My girlfriend and I were still spending our Saturday nights together, and life was good. Then Willie called to say they were moving back to Ireland. His grandmother was in bad condition, and she wanted to see him. He asked if I would like to join. I was just having some quiet time, so I took 2 weeks off. On a hunch, I contacted my old office at SHAPE to see if anyone I knew was still there. It turned out that 2 remained. I asked one of them to contact the Danish military mission office and see if they could give me Irene's contact information. I left my contact information in case they were unwilling or unable to give me her contact information. 2 days later, they called me at the office. It was her. The Danish office contacted her and gave her my number at the Pentagon. When I answered the phone and she told me who she was, I was a little surprised. "I didn't know if you remembered me," I said. She laughed. "Of course I remember you. I asked your communications office at SHAPE several times to give me your number, but they refused. We updated each other on what we were doing in life, but there was no talk of any guys or girls. I told her I would be in Ireland for 2 weeks. Can you come to Denmark? I'd like to see you." We discussed the possibility and decided that we would meet in Copenhagen. After 2 days with Willie and his family in Clifton, I flew to Copenhagen. I was going to spend 2 days there, but it turned into a week. When I saw her at the airport, she did not change in appearance, and there was such joy in her that I had never seen before. It's strange how I thought about you, Philip, and I mean it. Not that other guy we won't mention who looks like you. We stopped talking and just looked at each other. Do you know when I first started looking at you differently? I have no idea. The week of Christmas, when you volunteered to go to work so everyone could rest. I found out you did this after I found out that if I worked on the scheduled day, I wouldn't be able to be home for Christmas. That wasn't the only reason. I remember other things. Which, for example, like at the party when my father spoke to you. I arrived home on Christmas, and they came back with me for New Year's. I told them about you, and when I pointed out you at the party, my father, who was a little drunk, decided to talk to you and convince you to leave there so that I wouldn't have to see you. I apologize for that too. I laughed. It's normal. He was just looking out for my well-being. As I said, I planned to stay for 2 days, but we had so much fun together that I stayed for a week. Last night we had sex. I wish I could say it was the best I've ever had, but it wasn't. We both tried too hard, and it was all rushed. We both had it better. Fortunately, we had other opportunities to improve. For almost the next 2 years, we took turns flying across the Atlantic to visit each other. My 3 years in the Pentagon ended, and I was transferred to Germany. I sold my house, packed my things, and left. By then, I was already a captain, and my new assignment was at USAR headquarters. When I received my assignment, I remembered that my boss at the Pentagon said that I only needed team experience, and I received it. Garrison commander. This was a position for a major, and I was a captain. Things were going well. The job was great. Irene returned to SHAPE, and we spent most of the weekends together. Things were getting serious between us, and I loved traveling to SHAPE, whether it was a 5-hour drive or a 4-hour train ride. Almost a year after that, she convinced herself to get a job as a lieutenant in the Danish army at USAR headquarters, and we rented an apartment together. We were discussing marriage when my branch office called me and told me that since my 3 years in Heidelberg were almost over, I needed to go to Afghanistan. So Irene and I had sex, kissed, said goodbye with tears, and I left. A month later, I returned to Germany to a military hospital, but I didn't know about it because I was in a coma. When I came out, Irene was sitting by my bed, holding my hand. She told me how I ended up here. There were 6 of us in the car when we were attacked. 4 of the 6 died almost immediately. Only the driver and I survived, but barely. Amputation of my left leg below the knee was discussed. But apparently they were not prepared for Irene's. Judgment in all 4 languages he speaks, which convinced them to wait and let me make that decision myself. When presented with all the options, I chose to keep the leg, even though it would be one big mass of scars and deformities, and I would have to limp for the rest of my life. Irene smiled when I told the doctors about this. She took my hand and said, "He can still dance with a limp, but he can't dance with one leg." I didn't know where she got it from because we danced no more than a dozen times. I looked at her. She leaned over and said, "I have plans to dance with you for a long time." Then she kissed me. I went through rehabilitation for another month. Irene was there for every physical therapy session, supporting me whenever needed. I was scheduled to return to Canoes for further treatment, rehabilitation, and an assessment of whether I could remain in the military. It took a long time, but I managed to convince them to let me stay in Germany for rehabilitation and evaluation. 3 months after successfully passing the Army's annual physical test, the board approved my continued active duty. I was given another staff assignment at USAR headquarters. 2 months after this, Willie was my best man when Irene and I got married in Copenhagen. In his broken English, her father told me he was glad I didn't go away. We spent 2 years in Germany. We wanted more, but she needed to return to Denmark for 2 years. There was no job for me there, so I returned to the States. We were separated for 3 months, and I flew to Copenhagen to spend a few days with her. I don't like surprises, but I decided to surprise her. Bad idea. I knocked on the door of her apartment, and a man opened it. I knew enough Danish to understand that "ah God" meant "oh God." We stood there looking at each other for a full 30 seconds, not knowing what to say. Finally, I asked, "Where is Irene?" When I asked him where Irene was, I tried to get around him to enter the apartment, but he blocked my way. "She doesn't live here." "Where is she?" I pushed it through and looked around the room. He stood in front of me, trying to block my way, all the while speaking in a chuckle of Danish and English, which I didn't listen to because I wanted to find Irene and talk to her. The bedroom door was open, and I headed there. He got ahead of me, closed the door, and stood next to it. I knew it was the bedroom door because I was here when she moved. We heard a noise in the room. He looked over his shoulder as if he was trying to see through the closed door into the room. When he did, I pushed him aside, opened the door, and walked in just in time to see the bathroom door close and hear the metal click of the lock. I knocked on the door. Irene, come out. No answer. Irene, you have 10 seconds to come out and talk to me. I started counting. The man was still chatting, and I was still ignoring him. When I counted to 10, she still didn't answer, so I turned and headed for the front door. I picked up my carry-on luggage, which I had dropped when the door opened, and I saw a man. An hour later, I was at the airport. The same plane I arrived on was cleaned and ready to board, and was getting ready to take off. The only seat available was in business class, but I didn't care. I handed the ticket agent my credit card, received my boarding pass, went through immigration, who stamped me without looking too closely at me or my passport, and I headed to my gate. 15 minutes later, I was boarding the plane and my phone rang. It was Irene. I ignored the call. I entered my apartment, went straight to the bedroom, and collapsed on the bed. I had crossed the Atlantic twice and learned of my wife's infidelity since I last slept, so I fell asleep instantly. I woke up still dressed, including my shoes. I undressed, went to the toilet, shaved, and took a shower, something I hadn't done since I left on my short trip to Denmark. There were a dozen messages from Irene on my phone. I deleted them all without reading them. 3 months ago, when I returned to the States, I was sent back to the Pentagon to do the same job as last time. Apart from my one command assignment in Germany, it seemed that my specialty was as an active duty officer. I continued my master's degree in my free time and only had a year or so left to complete it. I showed up at my office the morning after returning from Denmark to the surprise of my colleagues. I knew I would get a ton of questions from everyone, so I made a general announcement and told them what happened. I received sympathy from everyone, after which we all got to work. I got caught up in my own affairs, trying to compensate for, I don't even know what, but I needed a distraction. 2 days later, as I was exiting the elevator in my building, a torrent of Danish abuse came at me. To loosely translate, I was called an ungrateful, uncaring bastard who didn't have enough faith in his wife to give her a chance to explain herself, and only a worthless son of a bitch could be so vile. That was the only part I understood, because she was also swearing at me in other languages that I didn't understand, so I had no idea what she was saying because I don't speak them. None of the dozen other people who poked their heads out of their apartments to find out what was happening in the corridor understood either. When she finished, she tossed me her passport. He hit me and then fell to the floor. "Now, son of a bitch," she said in English. "Look at this." I picked it up. She walked over to me, snatched it from my hands, opened it and flipped through it until she found the right page, then poked me at it and pointed to the seal. What do you see? As any traveler knows, when you enter a country and go through immigration, they stamp your passport with the date of your entry. They also stamp it when you leave the country. I saw a stamp saying that she had entered the UK 3 days before I arrived in Copenhagen. She made sure I saw it, then snatched it out of my hands again, found another page, pointed at it and asked, "Now, what do you see?" It was a stamp showing that she had left the UK just the day before. She picked it up again, found the very last page, and poked at it again. This showed that she entered the United States on the same day. So go to hell, asshole. I'm going home and I never want to see you again. She returned to the corridor to my apartment, took a suitcase and a backpack, which were standing in the corridor by the door, and walked past me to the elevator. All this time I tried to get her to stop and talk to me, but she ignored me. Even while waiting for the elevator, I literally begged her to talk, but she didn't hear me. When the elevator arrived and the doors opened, she stepped inside, put down her bags, and stood in the doorway, blocking my entrance. I tried to step over the bags, but she pushed me back as soon as the door closed. I rushed down 5 floors, but by the time I got down, she was nowhere to be seen. Now what should I do? I thought. She proved her point very well. It couldn't be her in her apartment if she was in England. But who was there then and why? I tried to call her many times, and each time I left a message, apologizing with all my might and literally begging her to talk to me, but to no avail. I called Willie and told him about my situation. He said he thought European women were different from American women to some extent. While some American women might try to cut you off dignity, mostly they just cry and suffer when they are mistreated, misunderstood, or neglected. They will hate you and hold a grudge. But if his wife, Sophie, was an example of European women, you better not get involved with them. Otherwise, you can hope that the least they will do is cut you off dignity. Remember, Irene flew over from England just to show you that you were wrong, and I'm willing to bet she's not done with you yet. My advice is to sit quietly for a while and see what happens. If you're lucky, she'll cool down and forgive you. Your main mistake was the same as most men's. You immediately thought about the worst and didn't give her a chance to explain. That's already 2 mistakes, and it's not a fact that there will be a third. The 3-strike rule. I'm thinking of going after her. Do this at your own risk. It's still fresh in her mind, and you might just make things worse. Give her time to think. She might not like it if I wait. She might like it if I act immediately. Maybe, maybe not. You pay the money and take your chance. Good luck either way. You know, I'll always be here to help you collect the rest. And I knew he would. A month has passed and no news. I assumed that if she wanted a divorce, she would start it in Copenhagen because that's where we got married. Then I remembered something. It took me 3 days to arrange for one lily of the valley to be delivered to her apartment in Copenhagen. A week has passed. Then another one, and another one. No calls from Irene. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer or call back. I contacted JAG Legal Services. They couldn't represent me in my divorce case, but they could probably give me some advice. The major I spoke to told me that since we are married in Denmark, any action or procedure for divorce or separation must come from there. I emailed Irene since she wasn't returning my calls, telling her that I would agree with whatever she decided. I just needed to know what it was going to be. 2 weeks later, there was no answer. The 3rd week was different. I rarely received mail. Like many other people, I did everything online. Weeks passed without any mail other than advertising. But that day, I received a notice of divorce and a petition for divorce. The original was in Danish, but a translation was included. Also included was a handwritten note from her. Philip, I thought a lot and came to the conclusion that our marriage was a mistake. And you didn't try to find out the truth about who was in my apartment. You just assumed that I was there with him, and that hurt me deeply. Sign the papers, and it's all over. Irene. I guess the lily of the valley wasn't a big deal. I signed the papers and sent them back. It didn't take long before I was called into the boss's office. Captain Parker, General Thompson is being promoted to 3 stars and is heading to Italy. He needs a new adjutant. He has seen you and your work and would like to talk to you about the job. What do you think of it? I don't know what to think or what to say. You can say you're not interested. To be honest, I'm not sure it's not. In that case, he wants to talk to you tomorrow morning at 9. Make sure you're in a clean uniform. He smiled when he said this. He always said this when one of us went one-on-one with a general's officer. The interview went well, and a month later I was flying to Italy as aide-de-camp to the newly promoted Lieutenant General William G. Thompson. I also received a promotion to major. This promotion came as a surprise to me. Relatively young captains are rarely promoted to major, unless, of course, a three-star general won't stand up for this. A general's aides de camp have little personal life that does not include accompanying the general, and often the general's wife, to the numerous functions to which they are invited. We were in Italy for 4 months, and I did not have a single day, except Sundays, when I was not doing something for the general. The military world is small, and if you stay in it long enough, you tend to see the same people over and over again over the years. In Italy, I met 2 officers I knew in SHAPE. General Thompson dined with some worthy people indoors in the officers' club, and I ate in the main hall nearby. 2 officers came in, saw me, sat down, and we had lunch. We reminisced about our days at SHAPE and asked each other about those we knew there. You know, that sexy Danish captain who worked in your office is back there. Only now she's a major and married to an American named Parker. Lucky bastard, one of them said. They both looked at each other. Damn it, it's not you, is it? I nodded. You mean you were married to her? Asked the first. I was, but we got divorced. Damn, kiss my ass. There was a pause before he spoke again. Just out of curiosity, is she really as hot as she looks? Jesus, Tony, said the second officer. What question should you ask a man about his wife? He just said they were divorced, so why not? They argued back and forth without coming to any conclusion. Finally, the first one, Tony, looked at me. Well, Phil, will you answer? I laughed. Of course. Imagine the hottest possible woman you can imagine, and I can almost guarantee she won't be as hot as Irene. Damn. Then why did you get divorced? I told them the story. When was the last time you saw her? About 8 months ago. Does she know you're here? Probably not. I was at the Pentagon the last time we saw each other. Then there will be a surprise for her next week. Why is this? Because she's part of a team that's coming here for 3 days to do a briefing. Which team? Pre-training team for NATO exercises in 3 months. This briefing is not on General Thompson's schedule, I said. This is for planners only. He will receive a briefing once the details are finalized. We ate in awkward silence for a long time. I had a lot of thoughts running through my head. The first was whether I should try to see her. We finished lunch just as I was told that the general was finishing his lunch and would soon be ready to leave. I went outside to make sure his car and driver were ready, then went back inside as he said goodbye. Back at the office, I asked the executive officer if he knew anything about the briefing. We just found out about it. They sent the document for information only to let him know it was going on. I was going to see if he wanted to meet with the briefing team just for fun. That's always good for public relations. Do you have a list of team members? Yes, right here. Can I see? Of course, but why are you so interested? My ex-wife might be one of them. This can't be good, he said, handing me the list. Irene's name was second on the list as deputy team leader, Major Irene Parker. I returned the list. Thank you. So are you going to meet her? There's no reason to, so probably not. Do you want me to warn the general? No. Just let me know if he decides to meet them. Then I'll tell him. The team arrived on Monday. They were to meet General Thompson's planning staff at 2 o'clock. General Thompson told his executive officer that he would stop by to say hello at 2:15 p.m. The executor informed me, and I went in to the general and gave him the list of participants. I think I should tell you that one of the team members you're meeting with this afternoon is my ex-wife. He looked at me, then at the list. I'm guessing she's the one whose last name is also Parker? He chuckled as he asked. He had a playful side to his personality that I didn't fully appreciate yet. My first question is, are you on good terms? I don't think so. She hasn't spoken to me in months. That's probably normal. Next question, is she competent at her job? She was when I worked with her. So over the next few minutes, I told him about our relationship. "Would you like to accompany me to the meeting?" he asked with a grin. "Some people are impressed if you work for a 3-star general. Perhaps she will be impressed." I laughed. "I doubt it, but I'll open the door for you when you come in." At precisely 2:15 p.m., I opened the door to the conference room. The gatekeeper stood up and shouted, "Attention!" The general entered ahead of me. I stood at the door while he walked across the room to the head of the table. His staff was on one side of the table and his briefing team was on the other. He sat at the head of the table and asked everyone else to sit down. Everyone sat down at once, except Irene. She was a little slower because she was looking at me. Even for a couple of minutes while the general was speaking, I could see from the corner of my eye that she was looking at me. When he finished, he asked the briefers to introduce themselves. Everyone stood up, said their name, rank, country, and role in the team. When it was Irene's turn, she stood up, introduced herself, and sat down. At that moment, the general said, "Ah, Major Parker. I understand that you know my adjutant, who is also Major Parker." She stood up again. "Yes, sir. We know each other." Then she quickly sat down. He finished his remarks, wished everyone well, said he looked forward to their report, and stood up to leave. When he stood up, everyone else stood up too. The gatekeeper opened the door and the general came out, followed by me. In the corridor, he turned to me. "You sure know how to pick them, Phil. She's very attractive." "Yes, sir. She is like that. I wish I could do it all over again with her." "So you still have feelings for her?" "Yes, sir, there is." "Then this might be a good time to try to work things out." "I don't know, sir. The last time we saw each other, she was very upset." My daily routine was to drive my car to his house in the morning. His driver met us there and took us to the office. In the evening, the driver would drive us back home, take the car to the car park, and I would receive any instructions needed to prepare for the next morning. Then I took my car and drove home. Everything changed on those evenings when he had social obligations. This happened at least 3 evenings a week. I always left several sets of clothes, including evening clothes, at home in case of unexpected changes in plans. That evening, the general and I spent a few minutes talking before I got into the car and drove to the officers' club for dinner. There was always a board with evening activities in the lobby. The first item on the list was a reception for the visiting SHAPE team. I turned around to leave. I thought I could have a hot dog dinner in my room. The board was right next to the front door, so I only walked a couple of steps inside and the same number of steps to the exit, but I couldn't get out. Phil. In the moment it took me to turn around, I went over everything that had happened in my mind, and it came down to the fact that I had made a very bad assumption. Everything else was a result of this, so it was all my fault. I could even understand why she didn't accept my apology. I turned around, and there she was. "Hello, Irene." "Leaving already? You just arrived." "Yes. I saw you were having a party and decided I didn't need to be here, even to say hello. I just did it. I was afraid to say anything more. My emotions might give me away." We looked at each other. I wanted to beg for forgiveness. I had no idea what, if anything, she wanted to say. Before any of us could speak, one of her team members saw her and took her back to the reception. I left and went home. I decided not to eat hot dogs and not have anything for dinner. We no longer communicated with her, and she and the team completed their business and returned to SHAPE. On the Friday after they left, I received a package from her via NATO courier. It contained an envelope from the same office that sent the original divorce notice. It was addressed to me at my address in Washington. My name was crossed out, and it said, "No longer lives here." It wasn't open. Attached to the envelope was a note from Irene. "Phil, I asked my lawyer to send this to you, but it came back. Now I know why. I'm surprised to see you on Monday. I hope you're happy." Lip. I opened the envelope, and it contained the same papers that I had signed and sent back. But this time attached to it was another handwritten note from her. Phil, I changed my mind about the divorce, so I didn't file those papers. Looks like I love you even when I don't want to. If you feel the same, call me. Lip. I no longer had her phone number, but I found her office number in the SHAPE directory. This is Major Parker, she said when she answered. Also this, I received your package. And I love you. You could almost feel her smile across the line. There's a flight at 5:00. I can take it if you want. What time does it land? I'll meet you. When we drove the general home that evening, I told him about the telephone conversation. I'm happy for you and hope everything works out. Take the weekend, and Monday, if you need to, just let me know. I was waiting when she entered the hall. I wanted to hug her, but I wasn't sure if it would be too quick. There was no need to worry. She ran and grabbed me. We blocked the passage for quite a long time. Some guy passing by said something in Italian. What did he say? I asked her. He said take a number. We both laughed. We held hands in my car and as long as we could on the way to my apartment. My car had a manual transmission, so when my hand was on the gear shift, her hand was on top of mine. We didn't say much. We just enjoyed being around each other. 10 seconds after the door closed, we were back in each other's arms. We hung out and I asked if she wanted anything to eat or drink. We settled on wine. I poured us a glass. We clinked glasses and sat down on the sofa. We needed to talk, but where to start? She started. I was so mad at you. I know, and I understand. I'm really sorry, but seeing him and thinking that you're with him, I just went crazy. Me too. When he called me and told me you were there, I tried to call you to explain, but you didn't even answer the phone or read my messages. I thought you didn't even read them. This is even bigger than me. I was angry. I was on a mission and couldn't leave, but as soon as it was over, I flew to America to see you. The whole flight upset me even more. Then you weren't at home, and I couldn't get into your apartment. I had to. Waiting in the hallway, and it was even worse. I cried on the flight to you and cried on the flight back. I remained angry and decided to get a divorce, and she tried to calm me down, but I didn't listen. She paused for a few seconds, then continued. I calmed down a little by the time the papers you signed came back. My lawyer is my sister, who is smarter than me. She didn't send them to court. She just held them. We talked several times, and each time I was calmer. Then the last one. I realized I didn't really want a divorce and asked her to see if she could stop it until I talked to you. She told me she never sent them. She was just waiting for me to calm down. I told you she's smarter than me. She fell silent again and took a sip of wine. I tried to call you, but my number was blocked, and I got upset again because I thought you didn't even want to discuss with. What is it called? Reconciliation. Then I sent the papers back to you, but they came back because you were no longer there. I didn't know where you were or how to contact you. She paused. Then I saw you come in with the general, and I couldn't breathe. Yes, reconciliation is the right word. At first I was just angry and upset. I never wanted a divorce, and after you came to Washington, I tried to call you, but you didn't answer. She smiled. I ruined our first year together, and you ruined this last year. We can't afford any more mistakes. We both laughed. No, we can't, and we won't. I took a moment to take a sip before asking, who is he, and why was he there? He's my, how shall I say, cousin. He and his wife were staying there while their apartment was being painted. He opened the door, saw you, and at first thought you were Frederick. His English wasn't very good, and he was nervous. He was at our wedding and saw you there, and after he found out who you were, he tried to explain, but he couldn't because of his English, and you didn't listen to him. When he called me, he was very sorry that he didn't, was able to communicate with you and explain who he is. We sat for a long time without saying anything. I finished my wine and stood up to pour more. She saw what I was doing, drained the rest of hers, and handed me her glass. While I was pouring, she went to her carry-on luggage and took out something, returned to the sofa and sat down. I handed her the glass and sat down next to her. She set it down on the table without taking a sip and handed me what looked like an old, dried flower. When I received it, I cried with happiness, she said. This is the flower you sent. They always said that sex after reconciliation is the best sex you can ever experience. And after that night, I believe it. The weekend was fantastic. On Sunday afternoon, I called the general and confirmed that I could take Monday off. It was allowed, and we added it to the best weekend ever. On Monday evening, I took her to the airport. Working as an aide-de-camp to a general officer meant long hours and very little time for rest. But we took advantage of every opportunity we had. Travel between Belgium and Italy was frequent and enjoyable. This went on for 4 months. Then one day, General Thompson called me into his office. Phil, his wife and I are taking 2 weeks off. We're going back to Cleveland to see her brother. He's not in the best of health. We're leaving on Friday. In the meantime, we want you to take some time off too. Sorry to hear about her brother, sir, and I understand why she wants to see him. I'll take a vacation and spend it in Belgium. You won't have to. I talked to Sassur and told him that I wanted Major Irene Parker on my staff, so she's transferring here. She wanted it to be a surprise, but I don't like surprises. She'll be here on Friday. Frankie will take us to the airport so you can stay here and wait for her. I thanked him and left. The executive, administrative assistant, and secretary smiled at me as I walked by. I was living in Bach, where I seemed to spend most of my life, but it couldn't accommodate the two of us, so I went to the housing office to see if anything was available. Since I was the general's aide-de-camp, I was entitled to a house on the base. The only available house was on the so-called Alley of Colonels. I was not a lieutenant colonel, much less a colonel, but they moved me there anyway. No one will complain, since you are the general's adjutant, they told me. The house was furnished with government furniture, but it will do until we get our own. It was mid-Friday. The general and his wife had already left, and I was sitting in my office, twirling my fingers, when she entered. I jumped up, walked up to her, and kissed her. You don't seem surprised to see me, she said. Who told? General Thompson, and I'm glad he did. Come on, let's go home. Her car was loaded with her things, so she followed me to our house. She was surprised that we had a home. She expected us to be crammed into my small room at Bach for a while. It's not great, but it's our home for as long as we're here, I said. He is beautiful. The next 2 years were good years. General Thompson was transferred back to the Pentagon and asked me if I would like to go with him. Irene and I discussed this and decided that we would prefer to stay in Europe. The general completely understood this and, again, called Sassur, who arranged for both Irene and myself to be transferred back to SHAPE. As Mel Brooks said, it's good to be king. In our case, we were not kings, but we knew him, so it was almost the same. We are back in Belgium, and we have 3 years here, but we can extend it. Irene has been in the military longer than me, so she will retire before me. When I retire, we will live in America, but often visit Denmark to visit her family. Grandma Willie is still alive and kicking, but now she does it from a wheelchair. Willie, Sophie, little Philip, and his little brother Sean moved to Ireland to live. Life is good. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.